The borough of Brooklyn saw some of the worst crimes during a violent surge in the 1970s. From organized crime to random killings, we take a look back at the decade that was marred by violence and the people who fought to make a difference. This is Crime in the City, the 70s Brooklyn edition. Our first story begins in 1978, when David Berkowitz, the son of Sam serial killer who terrorized Brooklyn in the 70s, came face to face with his victims in court in what became a shocking scene.
It was supposed to be the day to pay, when a killer named David Berkowitz would hear his fate for killing 6 young people, wounding 7 others, and causing tremendous pain for a lot of other people, including the parents of the dead and the maimed. He could have heard himself sentenced to as much as 200 years in prison without any possibility of parole for 30 years. But that's not the way it happened, and Bob O'Brien explains why.
Outsiders expected this to be the final act in David Berkowitz's drama with the criminal justice system. A corrections department spokesman said Berkowitz seemed fine when he left Kings County Hospital this morning. It was shortly after his arrival at the State Supreme Court building in Brooklyn that David Berkowitz began to do what the insiders had been expecting. Most of those in the courtroom, including several Son of Sam shooting victims and members of victims' families, were among the outsiders. They knew something was wrong when prosecutors and all but 2 court officers suddenly left the courtroom 20 minutes after sentencing was to have begun. Word filtered out that Berkowitz had lunged for a window in a 7th-floor security office near the courtroom. 3 court officers were taken to the hospital after being bitten and kicked trying to subdue the Son of Sam. Apparently, Berkowitz didn't wish to be sentenced today. The moment he was led into the courtroom, Berkowitz curled his lips in a snarl. His eyes darted across the crowded room until he spotted Nasa Moskowitz, whose daughter Stacy was his last victim. He broke into a taunting chant. "Stacy was a whore, Stacy was a whore." Mrs. Moskowitz stood and yelled back at him, "You animal, she is not." Berkowitz shouted, that's right, I'd kill her again, I'd kill her again." As court officers wrestled Berkowitz out of the court, Bobby Violante, who'd been almost totally blinded the night Stacy was killed, began weeping openly. Then Brooklyn District Attorney Eugene Gold let it be known who the insiders were. "We were told last week the defendant would do something," Gold told Judge Joseph Corso. Corso then revealed that all 3 prosecutors, Berkowitz's attorneys, and Corso himself were pre-warned Friday when psychiatrist Daniel Schwartz submitted a report on his pre-sentencing interview with Berkowitz. Corso said Schwartz wrote, quote, "When asked what will happen in court, his mood changes once again. Now his face lights up, his eyes twinkle. He replies, 'I know, but I'm not telling.'" 18-year-old Donna DeMacy, shot in the neck by Berkowitz, got into an argument with an unidentified courtroom spectator afterwards. Shouting Stacy was a whore.
Felt like killing him. I felt like going up there and grabbing his eyes out because it was an act. And it was an act. He was an act.
You think he's doing it because he's trying to get away with something?
He wants more time.
It's not true.
Oh, yes, it is, because he wants more time for the case.
No, this man is not understood. I made a study of demonology the last few days. Just a minute.
Come on, lady. Listen, I was shot by him. I don't need anything you have to tell me. If you were shot by him, you might feel different, too.
No, I wouldn't feel different.
Yes, you would. You would, believe me. I don't care any about your family.
I have a young son that was injured the same way.
Oh, really?
And
By
I
him?
turned the
By
other
demons?
cheek.
By him?
Demons? Yes, by demons, real demons, yeah.
Let's go.
If I had him with me right now, I would do my thing for him. I would do what I have to do to him.
What do you mean?
Let's just say after I finished him, he wouldn't be around anymore.
So David Berkowitz was escorted back to Kings County Hospital, his sentencing delayed by judges from Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx until June 12th. A 3rd psychiatric examination will be performed before that date, something only Bronx District Attorney Mario Marola objected to, saying as long as a year ago this Berkowitz outburst was part of a grandiose plan. The judges slapped a gag order on all DAs and defense attorneys. David Berkowitz was given another 3 weeks before he must once again be brought face to face with the majesty of the law.
David Berkowitz was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, which he is currently serving. Robert Torsney, the first NYPD officer to be indicted on homicide charges in the killing of 15-year-old Randolph Evans in Cypress Hills, was found not guilty by reason of insanity. 1 year after being sent to a psychiatric hospital, a judge ruled for him to be released, much to the anger of that community.
Robert Torsney is the first and only New York City police officer ever indicted for homicide, committing homicide while on duty. Now, his defense for the shooting death of 15-year-old Randolph Evans of Brooklyn was insanity, a plea which angered many community groups and led to a series of demonstrations. Today, a judge ruled that Torsney, who has spent more than 1 year in Creedmoor State Hospital, should be released because he is no longer a threat to society. More on the story now from Steve Bauman.
Thanksgiving Day, 1976. Officer Torsney was responding to a report of a man with a gun at the Cypress Hills housing project. Randolph Evans was returning home here after dropping his grandmother off at the bus stop. According to Torsney, the boy pulled a gun, but several witnesses, including other officers, testified the shooting was unprovoked. No gun was ever found. And at Torsney's trial, his defense counsel convinced the jury that the officer's account of the incident proved he was insane at the time.
Earlier this month, Torsney was granted a court hearing based on state psychiatrists' recommendations for his release. They reported that during the entire year, they found no sign of the rare disease psychomotor epilepsy, which the defense claimed he had suffered at the time of the shooting. During a break in that hearing, we asked attorney Ed Rappaport if he didn't think it strange that his client had no reported seizures either before or after the day Randolph Evans was killed.
I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what the frequency of these type of episodes are, or whether indeed they even recur again. I don't know if it's strange or not.
You think it possible that he never was mentally ill or had these episodes?
Well, I don't know. I think he was mentally ill because a jury of this state, after listening to testimony, stated that he was, and that was the reason they acquitted him, by reason of mental disease or defect.
Today, at the housing project where Evans lived, every resident we spoke with knew the name Torsney and the history of the case. They were unanimous in their bitterness over today's decision.
It's not justice. It's not fair. It's not fair. Anybody listening, anybody in this neighborhood knows this is not justice. He has to be black. He got any black and white, man. We talking about justice. It's not got nothing to do with race or nothing. You understand? He was wrong, and it should apply to anybody. You understand? It was murder.
But the jury did find that he was suffering from a mental illness at that time.
At the time? Oh, come on.
They said he had a mental problem. That's why he killed him. And now they're just letting him go. It just don't seem right.
Well,
but he's out free now, right?
He may be soon.
Or maybe he's going to be dead soon also.
Within hours of the judge's decision, a local community group was organizing a protest demonstration for this weekend. Late this afternoon, the State Appellate Division stayed Torsney's release until January 3rd, when they'll hear arguments from the district attorney and the defense. If they do not overturn Judge Yoswine's decision, Torsney could then be immediately released and even obtain his disability pension, for which he's already applied. This is Steve Bauman, Channel 5 News.
On July 9, 1979, Torsney was released from Creedmoor Psychiatric Center. It was the attempted heist that made movie history. John Wadowitz, the bank robber who inspired the Al Pacino film Dog Day Afternoon, looks to turn his life around 6 years after that infamous crime.
It began Tuesday, August 22, 1972, when two armed men walked into the Bensonhurst branch of Chase Manhattan Bank, held it up, were surprised at the door by cops, ran back in and grabbed hostages. For almost 14 hours, bank robber John Wadowitz screamed orders at an army of cops and FBI agents, threatened to shoot the bank's employees, and finally negotiated a limousine ride to Kennedy Airport to a plane waiting to take him to Algeria, he thought. But at the airport, FBI agents killed his accomplice and disarmed him. The admitted bisexual told the court he had done it all to get money to pay for his homosexual lover's sex change operation, without which he maintained the man would die. The judge listened and said 15 years. That was 6.5 years ago. Today, John Wadowitz, the bisexual bank robber whose role was played by Al Pacino in the movie Dog Day Afternoon, is looking for a job in Manhattan and living in a Federal Bureau of Prisons halfway house. He says he'll take any job, but what he really wants, he says, is a position as a guard in a bank. Why would any bank want to hire you?
Why would any bank want to hire me? Well, because I would be a good security guard for one reason. If I'm guarding their bank, who's going to rob it?
Wouldn't you be a lousy security risk, though?
No, because I'm a first offender and I committed a crime to save somebody's life. I'm not a criminal, I'm a 9-to-5 man.
What happens to you if you don't get a job in a bank or some other place in the next month?
Well, I'm going to have to go back to the joint and do 8.5 more years.
How would you feel about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't like it too much. It's been 6.5 long years now.
Is that enough of a price to pay for what you did?
That's too much of a price. People kill people, don't do that much time. And I didn't kill nobody.
John Wadowitz was eventually arrested again and served 2 more prison sentences for parole violations. He was released in April 1987. Organized crime had a powerful grip on New York City in the 1970s, but it was a mob hit in Bushwick that weakened the mafia's presence in the Big Apple.
The tradition of organized crime and its leaders has long been a bloody one. Still, to hit a mobster as powerful and feared as Carmine Galante takes a go-ahead from the top. John Miller has an inside look into the death of a Don.
So it ended here in the backyard of a Brooklyn restaurant. Carmine Galante was the victim of a few men with guns. But the beginning of the end started only recently, here in New York City. Galante, it seems, was the victim of a bad time in the courts and a lot of bad public relations, which for a mobster can mean death. And death came today. Galante's demise was almost as fast as his rise to power. It began back in 1974. Chalk it up to good timing. Shortly after Galante was released from federal prison, the then mob boss of bosses, Carlo Gambino, died of natural causes. Gambino had long held the #1 spot, and 2 other mobsters were long in waiting to grab it. They were Agnello Della Croce, known as a tough hood who would stop at nothing, and Funzi Thierry. Like Della Croce, Thierry was in ill health. And along came Carmine Galante. Known best for his involvement in heavy importing of narcotics, Galante had been a black sheep among black sheep. The mob frowned on heroin as a principal source of income, but Galante saw it as a replacement for less profitable games like gambling and small-time shakedowns. Galante's rise was swift and bloody. More than a dozen mob hits were carried out, and it became apparent that Galante was here to stay. That was the start of a long process of dismantling the Galante power structure in organized crime. The federal government, in the form of the United States Attorney, the FBI, and the U.S. Parole Commission, began harassing Galante through every legal means. The FBI kept him under constant surveillance, which led to his arrest for consorting, a rarely enforced law that prohibits parolees from associating with other known criminals. Galante went back to jail. After his release, the Parole Commission again revoked his freedom when it was charged he had bribed a parole officer, and he was about to face another hearing that might have led to his 4th jailing. On top of all that, over the past 4 years, federal authorities have gone to much trouble to keep the media supplied with constant leaks about the mobster's activities. It gave him the kind of high profile that can be the kiss of death to any mobster. All of that set the scene. New York's 5 families were in chaos, and their leader was weak. Bouncing in and out of prison, constantly written about in the press, Carmine Galante's empire was crumbling. The motives for his murder are varied. His involvement in drugs and possible double crosses with Dominican cocaine sources put him in some disfavor. And the argument between Galante and the Philadelphia forces over Atlantic City gambling was another straw. Galante believed that Atlantic City was his territory, but Philadelphia mob leader Angelo Bruno argued it was his. A meeting was set up to discuss that here in New York. That meeting would have taken place tomorrow, but the word was already out. Galante had agreed to step aside. So why was he hit? Federal sources and underworld sources agree. No one trusted him to say down if the big chance came around again. For the neighborhood, the passing of Carmine Galante meant a lot of excitement. Hundreds of people took to the streets of this Brooklyn block trying to catch a glimpse. For organized crime, it means the beginning of something new, a new struggle for control at the top of New York's 5 families. From Knickerbocker Avenue, John Miller, Channel 5 News.
For our next story, we take a look at a double murder that was both gruesome and mysterious. 2 men hacked to death by an axe in Red Hook. But it was a cryptic note found by police that made this horrific crime even more chilling.
Police are puzzled by a double murder in Brooklyn, and as Christopher Jones reports, they're worried about the killers. They're worried that they may have their sights set on other potential victims.
The Red Hook section of Brooklyn is one of those curious parts of the city where there is peace on the streets and violence at the same time. Today, the violence spilled out again. This time, two men in their 50s, characterized by the police as wino types, were found dead in a vacant lot littered with junk cars at Garnett and Smith Streets. The men had been hacked to death. Police discovered a note when they investigated the scene after 3 teenage boys called in their grim discovery this afternoon. The note said, 2 down, 9 to go. Police would not officially confirm the contents of the note, nor are they sure just what it means. The victims are familiar neighborhood characters. It still is not clear what association they had with each other, if any, or who the other 9 intended victims may be.
Any indication that these men were killed somewhere else and dropped at that site, or were they disposed of there?
No, from the evidence that we have at the scene, it looks like the lot was the place of the occurrence. It took place in the rear lot.
The police really have their work cut out for them, not only to identify these victims, but to determine whether that note was valid, and if it is, to get to the 9 other potential victims before the murderers do. Christopher Jones, Channel 5 News in Red Hook, Brooklyn.
A murder sent shockwaves through a local Jewish community. A rabbi from Russia seeking religious freedom in the U.S. was shot dead in the streets of Crown Heights while walking to a synagogue.
A 62-year-old rabbi was murdered in Brooklyn today, shot to death on a street in Crown Heights while he was walking to a synagogue. He went there 3 times a day. He was a man who cherished life and he loved his religion. He spent a lot of time in Soviet jails because of it. He was a Lubavitcher, and that means love for humanity.
It was a dramatic picture, a sad story. Dressed in black, a sea of Hasidic Jews made their way through the business district towards the scene of a murder. On their shoulders, they carried the victim's body. Rabbi David Okenak was shot in the head this morning by a gunman who witnesses described as a 25-year-old black man. Racial tensions between blacks and the Hasidim here is an old story, and the large turnout today put police on edge. But as the funeral march made its way past the stores that had closed for the day, towards the spot where the rabbi died, there was no talk of racial tension. There was angry talk of another kind, directed at Mayor Koch.
Instead of helping us, the city is calling us racist. For how long we gonna wait? Another year to touch us to run again. God damn it, I don't care. If he's gonna win or if he's gonna lose, he has to deliver now. This is not his blood. This is blood of the city.
The 62-year-old rabbi had been in this country only 3 years. Police believe his murder was a robbery attempt. The briefcase he was carrying contained only a blue velvet bag like the one you see here with a tallis and a tefillin, religious articles of little monetary value. Rabbi Okenak spent much of his time working with Russian immigrants like himself, teaching them the language, helping them find work, and getting them acquainted with life in the United States, a life that was, for him, short-lived. The final prayers were said in front of 656 Crown Street. This is where the rabbi had lived. Friends said while in Russia, he had spent 15 years in Russian prisons before coming to this country to live a life of freedom, he told them. They said it was ironic that he would have to die this way in America. John Miller, Channel 5 News in Brooklyn.
And finally, when crime became too much for the neighborhood of Borough Park, a group of women from different cultural backgrounds decided to do something about it. Defying the traditional gender roles at the time, these women went on patrol in the hopes of curbing the crime.
It was just a couple of weeks ago that angry Brooklyn residents staged a riot at a police station in Borough Park, a community torn with tensions, not only between Hasidic Jews and police, but among various other ethnic groups. But now, as Gabe Pressman tells us, there's an effort to bring these often hostile groups together in a common cause.
Unit 3 to base. We are at 42nd Street, proceeding 16th Avenue. Everything looks normal. Over.
These 2 members of the new Borough Park Women's Patrol come from very different backgrounds. Mrs. Rachel Rodriguez, the woman reporting the base on the walkie-talkie, is Hispanic. Behind the wheel is Orthodox Jewess Harriet Singer. They've been neighbors for a while, but until a few weeks ago, they barely knew each other, and they came, ethnically speaking, from different sides of the tracks in Borough Park, where Hispanic, Jewish, and Italian neighborhoods are clustered together. The people who live in them have been cold to each other, if not antagonistic. But now, faced with the common problem of protecting life and property, Orthodox and Hasidic Jewish women, Italian and Hispanic women have joined together to form this patrol, riding the streets by day, on the lookout for strangers, intruders who might try to rip off their people. They're tied in with the police. An amazing phenomenon, since in all three groups there's a macho tradition among the men who like their women folk to stay home. As Councilwoman Susan Alter, who helped the group get started, says,
these women are distinctly unobtrusive in their cultures. Certainly to come out in the world in this kind of way, very openly, in a very aggressive manner, I mean, riding shotgun, is kind of unheard of in general, most specifically in these three cultures. So what the women are doing is they're keeping their activities during the day low-keyed from what...
Here you are working together when all these years you've been polarized, as they say. How do you feel about that? How do you look at that?
I feel it's a wonderful idea, you know, that three, you know, other ethnic groups, you know, can get together and do something for the neighborhood.
Do you think, in a way, you as women are kind of showing the men what can be done?
Well, I certainly hope so. I think that basically we have the same values. We all want safety for our families.
It's too early to tell whether the new Women's Patrol will actually cut the rate of crime in Borough Park, but one thing is certain. There is a positive result already. Mrs. Rodriguez and Mrs. Singer agree. For the first time, people from different groups are talking to each other, and that's to the good. This is Gabe Pressman, Channel 5 News in Borough Park.
That's this week's Crime in the City. Subscribe for more at youtube.com/Fox5NY.